So yeah, sorry for that. I had to take care of some business. So that's why I said, okay, doesn't matter. Let's resume. So, as I said, the 9/11 attacks are the worst act of terrorism to ever occur in U.S. soil. So, it was a regular Tuesday, September 11, 2001, New York City. Until 8 a.m., 4 planes were hijacked by terrorists, Al-Qaeda terrorists. The first plane in the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Less than 20 minutes later, a second plane hit the South Tower of the World Trade Center. Now, the first plane that hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center wasn't caught by anyone. It was just there's just this one video of a plane hitting the North Tower, because it happened out of nowhere. Nobody filmed it, but every news organization filmed the second plane hitting the South Tower of the World Trade Center. Every news organization, because they were filming that a plane had just hit the North Tower, and so while reporters were covering that, a second plane hit the other tower, and so it was shocking. Every reporter was shocked; they just couldn't believe what they were seeing. And so at the beginning, when the first plane hit the North Tower, the reporters were saying, "Okay, this was just an accident. A plane probably accidentally hit the tower." But when that second plane hit, we all knew, everybody knew, this was an act of terrorism. And so, at 9:30 a.m., a third plane hit the Pentagon. And at last, a fourth plane crashed in an open field in Pennsylvania at 10 a.m. The attack killed nearly 3,000 innocent people and injured 6,000 more. Osama bin Laden, leader of the terrorist network Al-Qaeda, claimed responsibility for the attack. His motive? More like motives. He had many. He had U.S. support for Israel, Western support for attacking Muslims in Somalia, sanctions against Iraq following the first Gulf War, and more. And so the class activity, yes, I'm just gonna explain it to you. So the class activity during the 9/11 attacks, the fourth plane, the reason it crashed in an open field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, was because the passengers fought back. The hijackers of the fourth plane intended to hit the plane either on the Capitol building of Washington, D.C. or the White House. But since the passengers fought back, the plane hit an open field in Shanksville. And so the scenario is that at 8 a.m. Monday, all of you are in a plane that just before your departure to the air is hijacked by 5 armed terrorists. All of you are unarmed, though you outnumber the terrorists 10-1. The terrorists have a bomb so well made that they say it's capable of destroying the entire airport, which would kill thousands of innocent people. But it could be a fake. The police come at the terminal and the terrorists demand $100 million. They kill 2 passengers to make an example to passengers to not fight back. Police say it's going to take a day at most to get the money, and so the terrorists say they will kill a passenger every hour. Police in response plans a secret attack at the plane, but SWAT says they will only execute the plan Tuesday at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning when the terrorists might be sleeping. So my question is, would you rally up people to fight back against the terrorists before they kill more passengers, even though there's a high chance more people will die, or wait for the money to come, or for the SWAT team to attack? So discuss with your classmates. So, another major event, George W. Bush signs the Patriot Act. So in response to the 9/11 attacks on October 2001, George W. Bush signed the USA Patriot Act. The bill's objective was to increase security measures by empowering investigations into terrorist activities. The bill, however, was heavily criticized for violating civil liberties with expanding government surveillance like wiretapping and harsh immigration policies. So, as many of you know, Edward Snowden, he leaked a lot of information about how the NSA spied on people, and the NSA claimed they could do that because of the Patriot Act. And of course, a lot of people don't agree with being surveillance 24/7. And so yeah, that's the reason it received a lot of criticism. So what does the Patriot Act stand for? So the Patriot Act, the USA Patriot Act, is an acronym. So what it really means is uniting and strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism Act of 2001. So yeah, that's a long name. So now we move to the Afghanistan war. A lot of things happened in 2001. So, Afghanistan war, right? The US government receives intel that the Taliban, the Afghan government, the Taliban were the Afghan government at the time, the US intel received that the Taliban are harboring terrorists. And so, 1 month after the September 11 attacks, in October, the US invades Afghanistan and topples the Taliban government. That was only the beginning, however, as the war still rages on to this very day. Incredible. And, Afghanistan, the war didn't really do anything because Afghanistan has become even more destabilized than it was before, as the Taliban launched an insurgency against the US and coalition forces, as well as the new established government that the US helped set up. So the Taliban, the Taliban aren't really as weak. Just recently, they managed to launch a full city attack. So even after 16 years since this war was launched, the Taliban are strong as ever. And also, Afghanistan is now number 4 on countries that receive the most terrorist attacks. And now we move to the Iraq War. Oh boy. So, President George W. Bush, on 2003, says on national TV, Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, and an invasion of the country is imminent. The U.S., along with a very big coalition about like 30 countries, even Honduras was on the coalition. So they invade Iraq on March of 2003 in order to topple brutal dictator Saddam Hussein and find and destroy his weapons of mass destruction. So in the end, Saddam is captured. Here it is right now. It was captured by U.S. forces. But even though he was toppled and captured, no weapons of mass destruction were ever found. And so when Saddam is captured, he's set on trial for war crimes, and he's then later hanged. So after this, however, Saddam, despite being a horrible person, he managed to keep terrorists off Iraq. He hated Al-Qaeda. And so despite Saddam, Saddam killed terrorists, but he also killed a lot of other people. So after Saddam is captured, a terrorist insurgency, mostly led by Al-Qaeda commander al-Zarqawi, begins in 2004. And this guy right here, he was a bad guy. I mean, this guy, he attacked Shiites, he killed a lot of people. So he was killed in an airstrike in 2006, but that didn't stop. I mean, eventually, Iraq became perhaps the most destabilized nation of the entire Middle East. So it didn't really work. So here we go again. Consequences of both Iraq and Afghanistan. So both countries went on to become very destabilized nations with constant terrorist attacks and weak and corrupt governments. The war in Iraq led to an infestation of new terrorist groups to the country, including a new but rather weak at the time, ISIS. So both wars led to thousands of civilians' death, 500,000 in Iraq, as well as millions of refugees and displaced people.
Wow.
Almost 7,000 U.S. soldiers have been killed in both conflicts combined. And both wars severely damaged the economies of Iraq and Afghanistan, where, for example, the destruction of Iraq's economy pushed unemployment up to 60%. So in the end, can you say that the war in Iraq was a failure? It ended in 2011, but was again resumed into 2014. So can you say it was a failure? You can absolutely say the war in Iraq and Afghanistan are both failures. Because in the end, terrorist groups managed to infiltrate both countries, and they managed to launch terrorist attacks and keep both countries on the edge. Keep both countries on the edge of their seat. Because they don't know, at any minute they can die in a bomb. Something they didn't experience before. Before, the only way you could be killed in Iraq was if you were against Saddam Hussein. If you weren't against Saddam Hussein, you were cool. But now it doesn't matter. Now you can be killed anywhere, at any time in Iraq. And then ISIS took a vast amount of territory in Iraq, and Taliban are still strong as ever in Afghanistan. So you can clearly say that both wars really, really failed. So yes, this is what I just said. The both wars were failures in the long haul. The U.S. was successful, however, in severely weakening Al Qaeda as well as other terrorist networks. It also liberated many towns and cities that at the time were in control of terrorist groups. However, the rise of terror attacks and ongoing insurgency not only in both countries but worldwide, like Paris, for example here, Paris, which suffered 3 major terrorist attacks in less than 2 years. But worldwide tell a different and darker side to the story. The eventual rise of ISIS in Iraq and Syria in 2014 overshadowed any good the U.S. and its allies accomplished. ISIS managed to occupy cities and towns that had previously been liberated by U.S. forces. For example, Mosul, Fallujah, Ramadi. All the cities were liberated but were then occupied by ISIS. In Afghanistan, terror attacks are increasing and the Taliban are still as strong as ever. So, Hurricane Katrina. This happened in 2005. I know. You're probably wondering when I'm going to get to the good side of the 2000s. Soon. But, the 2000s was a pretty bad decade. So, Hurricane Katrina. It was the costliest natural disaster in U.S. history. $108 billion in losses. 1,800 people died. Much of the city of New Orleans was flooded. Emergency agencies like FEMA, as well as the U.S. government, was criticized for unorganized rescue efforts and lack of preparation. It took actually 5 days for FEMA to actually send help to New Orleans, and so that action was heavily criticized by everyone. You can see people here screaming help. You can see how here the entire city of New Orleans was flooded, and so that really sucked for a lot of people. So wait a minute. So